Right, Steffen, thank you very much for taking your time here at the Smarter E and especially here at the EES Innovation Hub to have a conversation about your technology and the innovation that you provide to our field.
Absolutely.
Before we jump into today's topic, I would like to understand, how did you find into the field of battery innovation?
Personally, I've been part of the renewable energy sector for the last 10 years or so. And the last couple of years under the hood of Emaldo, where we basically transitioned the past company into an ecosystem for battery steering. I've always been very passionate about the climate changes that we are foreseeing and the responsibility that lies on all of us on that part. And there's no doubt there's so much we can do, but it needs to be incentive driven so that everybody's benefit from it. If not, I don't think that we will be successful in doing the transition fast enough. And what we see right now is that the world is increasing the heat faster than what we need, and therefore we all can do our part.
Great. To understand Emaldo's tech a little bit more in detail, what are you offering on the hardware side and on the software side? So you're contributing to the grid, right? Can you shine light a little bit on what you're doing and what your innovation is providing?
Sure. Emaldo is a fast-growing green tech company. And basically what we provide is we provide the best solution for the customer, being part of a smart home overall steering. And then we are combining that with the flex market. So we do deep integration into the grid operators so that we can do net balancing and support the grid in that sense. And today, Emaldo is represented in the Nordic countries. As of now, we are the market leader. We have 20,000 commercial and private units that we are aggregating on a daily basis. And we are, as we speak, expanding to other European-based countries.
So your business model is targeting both industrial customers, but also private consumers?
Yes. We both have hardware and software steering that cover both. Majority of our current product range, called the PowerFlex range, is predominantly for the residential part, and then moving into small, medium-sized industrial customers.
Okay, as an expert for integration of battery storage into the grid, can you explain what the current situation is, particularly for your main application in Denmark or the Nordic countries? And which problems are you solving with the technology that you have? You mentioned you have hardware and software, so give us an expert perspective on what the problem is, how you solve it, and also what others can learn from this. For example, the adoption of more renewables in Germany, where are the pain points?
Absolutely. To take it one by one, overall, as we also see here, as we see in Europe, there are plenty of solar systems being installed, both privately and also commercially. There are plenty of batteries now finally hitting the market, which is really good. The challenge is though that those technologies are not available for the grid besides buying and selling back energy. And that means that to do the tough part, where you actually deeply integrate and be part of the overall flex market, do the actual bidding, take on the responsibilities, you need to build the relationship and the connectivities into the utilities, the BRRPs, and the TSO in each of the countries. And that is where the complexity lies. But that's also where we can use the massive capacity, which is already there in the market and being applied every day, to be part of solving.
What do you mean with massive capacity? Can you?
If you look at it today, there are across Europe, there are being installed, hundreds of thousands of solar systems. They are isolated for the residential part, what it can do for you and your house, called behind the meter services. If you want to have a full ecosystem, including a higher degree of renewable energy into the market, being able to close down fossil-driven energy sources, you need to be able to store that renewable energy somewhere. And one thing is storing the capacity, the other one is doing frequency balancing in the market so that you're basically not harming the system when there is an imbalance. When you look at the energy mix that we have in Europe today, for those countries like the Nordics that have a very high degree of renewable energy for either wind or solar, that's great, but it's unpredictable. And when you have a grid, you need to look ahead and ensure that the consumption, which is increasing drastically, both for private households and industrials, that needs to be met. And when that needs to be met by renewable sources, we cannot steer when it's wind, when it's solar. Being able to use that capacity is key for actually ensuring that we keep on building out the grid. In the Nordics alone last year, there was about 12 terawatt hour worth of power that was just lost of renewable energy sources because you didn't have sufficient place to store it or use it to balance the grid.
Okay. And with your sharp perspective on the current situation, and you came with Emaldo came up with solutions, and you mentioned also in terms of C rate and the velocity of charging and discharging, in terms of the business case. Can you explain what are the metrics that you have to look at in order to operate successfully in the market?
Absolutely. The grid operators in each of the countries, so it could be National Grid in the UK, it could be Svenska Kraftnät in Sweden, Fingrid in Finland, and so on. These grid operators, they don't produce power, but they are spending billions of stabilizing the grid every year. Those services often goes to the utility companies. But battery is a really, really good way of doing grid stabilization.
Yes.
Because it's really fast reacting and it's a very reliable source of energy.
Controllable. Yeah.
That also means that we see many of these larger, like plus 1 megawatt up to about 50 plus megawatt hour worth of capacity on batteries installation coming for the commercial industrial segment. But you can, in addition to this one, this is what Emaldo does, is that the distributed energy solution, where you connect each of the individual already installed or new batteries into the grid, and for those close to where the energy is being consumed or produced, can be part of this. And at the same time, the billions of euro being spent every year, if we can incentivize the end consumer and the industrial customers to actually get a recurrent revenue by applying their systems into the grid, that's what Emaldo does today. So you can both earn money by grid stabilization and save money by using behind the meter services like own production, peak saving, energy arbitrage, and so forth. But combining those, you actually get the best out of the whole ecosystem, and that's what Emaldo wants to do.
Yes, and in your main market, Denmark, I think this is already status quo and commonly applied. How do you see the comparison to the rest of the EU, especially Germany, where also the regulatory part is still a little bit lagging behind the meter services? Just give us an understanding of how the Danish market compares to the German one, and where you see challenges, potential also in cooperating potentially cross-border. Yeah.
Sure. What we see in the Nordic region is, I think it's fair to say that they are far ahead of countries like Germany and so forth, other parts of Europe, on transitioning to renewable energy. We see countries like Iceland and Australia be even further ahead. But if we just take the learnings that we sit with, that means that those grid operators have, over the last couple of years, been working on how to ensure a high degree of flex into the market.
Yeah.
And that also means there's a lot of lessons learned on grid complexity, on the whole open market, on pricing, and so forth, which is key to actually make it a success in the other markets as well. And that means that in Germany, to take an example, they have endless amount of grid zones. They have very, very low penetration of
endless amounts of what?
Grid zones.
Yeah.
So that means that you have, I think it's like 800 zones individually that everybody needs to connect into to be able to do the grid stabilization part. For hardware players or software players, to do all of those connectivities is a huge task to do. Ensure all the underlying bidding and commitments is a huge task to do. It's not impossible, but it's very complicated. And at the same time, in Germany, you still have a very, very high degree of fixed pricing, which takes away the incentives for actually doing something in this regard.
That's true, yeah.
And if it takes a long time to transition...
It's a heavy debate at the moment. If we take away the fixed pricing in order to incentivize the build-up of storage system at particular locations, because right now there is no really incentive to do it.
And that's also the issue that if you look at the Nordic region, the reality is that you have, consumption peaks during the day. That is in the morning and is in the evening. Then on the industrial side, you have a flattening out throughout the day. But that also means that reality is the cost of energy is much higher when you have a high load demand on your grid. And that means that in the German system, where you have a flattish price, first, you don't incentivize the private consumer to actually invest in this part, but also second, the need for battery is low because you cannot use that battery for that much. If you have high peak pricing throughout the day, a battery is perfect to basically store during the midday, push it out, charge at night, push it into the morning. So the renewable market, they are further ahead on the renewable part. They have needed to transform into a different way of operating, incentivizing both what's actual cost, but also what is the consumer's behavior. And I think we will see that when Germany goes further away from coal, going on to more wind, solar is already being transitioned, the need for battery capacity will increase dramatically. And if the private consumer as well, distributed energy solution can help, why not?
Yeah. It's interesting. I just you may know, or you don't. I don't know if there's a German podcast, like colleagues of mine, which is called Geladen, which talked recently about the build-up of the grid and allowing the different charge points. Now, so the build of transformers basically, and how fast we can increase the numbers of locations where you can hook up new PV systems, new battery systems, etc. And it's like 300 above 300 gigawatt hours that only in the north region of Germany are requested to be hooked up to the grid at the moment. It's a gigawatt in power was stated. And I'm really curious to see the changes, the regulatory changes that now are not coming in order to enable this build up. Because I see, and then that's the question to you, I don't see the issue really in providing the battery or the grid technology as such, but to get the regulations through the building permits to allow the connectivity to the grid and then help the grid being stabilized by batteries and thereby also later on having lower energy prices.
The technology is there. So it's a matter of applying the technology and make it easy. But there's a big difference of having what I would call a simple solar battery solution for your house that ensures that optimized, and the whole layer towards the grid. And the whole layer towards the grid is very complicated, but it's also a huge amount of money being spent on that side. And at the same time, it's critical for all of us, because if we don't transition to renewable energy, we will not see the climate impact that we all want.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. And that is also the reason why I started the battery expedition. So building up a electrically driving video podcast studio, traveling all across Europe for 8 months on visiting the leaders of our field, understanding firsthand who has which competence to offer, what can Germany learn from Denmark, for example, or beyond. So this whole thing goes down to Spain, up to Norway, all the way. And yeah, I'm also curious to visit you along the way in Denmark.
Absolutely.
If I get the invitation, I'm happy.
Any day.
Stop by.
Any day. You're more than welcome.
All right, Steffen. Do you have anything as a last point? If there would be one advice, one wish that you could give to our field, what would it be?
I think we need to acknowledge that the technology is fairly advanced today. The green transition, we just started. If you look at Germany, the amount of EVs, very low. Heat pumps coming in. We have just started the green revolution. I think the key part is to make sure that the technology meet the market demand, and by that moving the distributed energy into the grid stabilization, and that will require regulatory changes and so on. And the energy industry, there's a lot of conflict of interest here. We need to take them away with one common goal, and that is to make the world greener.
All right, we'll do so. Thanks, Steffen.
Pleasure.